Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Investing in Entrepreneurs panel. I will now turn you over to John Morris, the CEO of 17 Asset Management, who will be the moderator for this.
Thank you, Yoshi. And I take the title of moderator lightly. I'd like to be the chief fly on the wall to two great people that I've had the chance to meet. Sylvester Mobley of Coded by Kids and Omar Woodard of Greenlight funds. And they're both making a huge difference in people's lives. They're also great examples to others based on their history and their journey. They are platforms, basically, in how they go about it, one in technology and education and one in financial, but both as a platform for human development and enriching lives and creating opportunities. They have touched and developed many different entrepreneurs with some of the resources needed that today's discussions in different sessions have occurred. So it's really my pleasure to be with both you, Sylvester and Omar. And I'll just throw a few things about your backgrounds that I just find really incredible. You both have achieved a tremendous amount in your journey to what you're doing, whether it is an education in the field of study or in your commitment to community or service to our country. That is really impressive, and all with amazing accolades, whether it be the incredible military service across different the Marines and the different services, the three different forces that Sylvester had his earlier days in, or his education, or whether it's Omar and his studies at George Washington and Harvard and what's created him. But they also are dedicated to Philadelphia and the people of Philadelphia to create opportunities for many others. So I'd love to start with just a little bit of your personal journeys, and because based on your criteria, you on paper, you could be doing most anything anywhere. And I'd just love to hear a little bit about each of your journeys and how it's settled into Philadelphia and why. Maybe starting with you, Sylvester.
Oh, I was hoping you were going to start with Omar. His journey is definitely more exciting than mine. I am a native of Philadelphia, born and raised. I'm a product of the Philadelphia public school system. I also was not a great student growing up. And to say I wasn't a great student, that is definitely an understatement. But I had a really intelligent father who sat me down my senior year of high school and said, "Hey, college isn't for everyone. And based on the last 4 years of your performance in high school, it's probably not the best decision for you. And I'm not going to pay for you to go and waste my money and do what you just did in high school. But you need to do something. Figure out what you're going to do. And I want you to, commit to it and do it." I said to myself, I was 17 when I graduated high school. I said to myself, well, my dad was a Marine. How hard could it be? Again, just poor 17-year-old decision making. I decided I would join the Marine Corps. So spent 4 years in the Marines. Learned that you can re-enlist, but didn't have to re-enlist in the same branch. So joined the Air Force. And that was how I got into tech. The job I picked in the Air Force was computer network cryptographic switching systems. The Air Force has to this day, one of the best systems I've seen for taking people who don't have technical backgrounds and preparing them for highly technical careers. So I'm very appreciative of the Air Force. I got into the job by accident. I didn't know what the job was. I just knew after spending 4 years in the Marines, I didn't want to do anything like that anymore. So when the recruiter showed me the different jobs, that job, the guys were all sitting in front of computers. I could tell they weren't missing any meals. They weren't spending much time outdoors. And I was like, hey, that is all I need to see. I want that job. So my journey into tech started there, and I truly appreciate it. And along the way, I earned a degree in finance from Temple. I didn't want a degree in something that I thought I already had a good foundation in. Then ended up serving in the Army, served in Iraq, and I think service is probably the one theme across all of the things that I've done. Looking for ways to serve, I guess, to some extent, what I look at as the greater good. How can I do something that's going to have an impact on someone else?
Fantastic. Over to you, Omar.
See, I was hoping, it's hard to follow Sylvester, right? I'll try. I am also a native North Philadelphian, 16th in Lehigh, 28th in Allegheny. Went to Girard College, boarding school for low-income single-parent children, and I think that was my initial introduction to entrepreneurship in the context of philanthropy. Stephen Girard at the time, he was a philanthropist, but he became a philanthropist because of his entrepreneurial spirit. And so from my earliest times, I was taught about entrepreneurship and its pathway to becoming a philanthropist and being philanthropic. So it was, I learned early on. After spending 15 years in Washington, D.C., working across federal government, working across software companies, and then landing into venture philanthropy, I've very quickly been inspired over my career by entrepreneurs who are willing to take risks, see a problem that needs to be solved, and then array not just their efforts and their time, but others who believe in their leadership and believe in their ability to execute on a plan and a vision. And that's transformative for individuals, it's transformative for communities. And over the last 10 years, I've been lucky enough to be able to raise funds to invest in those types of entrepreneurs, whether they're launching nonprofit models or for-profit models, and it inspires me every day. What brings me to this work, though, is the issue of problem solving. Growing up, my mom, 20 years old, GED, trying to figure out a way in the world as a single mom, there were a lot of problems to be solved. This is something that's generally public, but both of my parents were incarcerated, and when they came home, it was difficult to find work. And so you can imagine the need to be entrepreneurial to raise a family when there are tremendous barriers to employment and garnering income. So that's my background, right? That's the environment in which I came from, which understands that entrepreneurship isn't just to solve a problem to make money. It can be often for survival, or for sustenance, or for a way to create a way for your family when there are large and high and tall barriers to your economic success and that of your family. So that's why Greenlight Fund, of which I'm proud to serve as executive director, we invest in organizations that do employment placement for individuals coming home from state prison. It's one of the reasons why we invest in programs that help individuals and families in public housing build assets. And so the work, the work that we do is really about solving problems, and not just problems to make money, but problems to transform lives. And it's always a joy to see Sylvester and others who really believe in that ethos and try to spread it and scale it across the city and our region.
That's great. Let's stay on that theme of problems and problem solving, which in many ways both of you all kind of embrace. Sylvester, what problems did you see that you applied yourself, and how has that informed what you do and what the organizations that you have built up come to bear?
I think the problems that I was seeing, the problems that I still see, were happening at a couple different levels. At a smaller level, I was seeing the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech. And, you know, being in tech, I'm looking at this and saying to myself, there is so much opportunity here. Why aren't there more people who look like me in these spaces? But at a larger level, I was seeing what was happening economically. And I was seeing this, almost like a mismatch where you have underrepresented people who are concentrated in low-paying jobs. They're concentrated in sectors that are being replaced by automation, and grossly underrepresented in the spaces that have significant opportunity, in the spaces that are helping to move people forward. And then on top of that, I also saw, Omar was mentioning the entrepreneurship and needing to get people into those spaces, and what it does. I was watching us try to solve problems without actually focusing on the root of the problem. And all too often we're solving problems by addressing the symptom, or the result of the problem, and that was frustrating. I was having conversations with people about things like poverty, and I would talk to people who would really get passionate about wanting to solve poverty, but then when I would start talking about education, they didn't want to have anything to do with education. And I would say, like, well, but if you want to solve poverty, you got to fix education, because the education system is what leads to a poorly performing education system is what leads to poverty. But you had these things coming together at the same time, and I felt like if I started to focus on roots of problems, and then through focusing on the roots of problems, use technology and innovation as that catalyst, use that as the way of helping people move forward, but also stay where they are, then I could have at least some measure of an impact.
Yeah, I mean, Omar, I've seen some of your material, and you talk about risk factors and how they in your whole investment process, when putting in the terms of problems and solutions. Could you just discuss that a little bit?
Capital tends to solving problems that aren't at the root of the problem, to Sylvester's point. There are a layer of challenges faced by communities, individuals who are entrepreneurial, but because of the nature of their identity, their community, their background, there are barriers to them not just building ambition, entrepreneurial ambition, but actually achieving and executing on that ambition. I think about it all the time. The problems that need to be solved, the capital doesn't go there. It doesn't go that deep. And so what we need to do is actually begin to, I think, surface the entrepreneurs that go overlooked, the problems that are often overlooked. And when you start doing that, when you start getting closer to the root cause of the problem rather than symptoms, right? When you're getting at the real issue, you start seeing tremendous opportunities for alpha. You start seeing tremendous opportunities for accelerating new models and new ways of doing and being for both entrepreneurs and potential consumers. And until we unlock that, until we really get to solving the underlying challenges facing our communities, we're not really gonna, I think, unlock the promise of entrepreneurship in the 21st century in America the way we'd like. It's really gonna involve having a different view of who is an entrepreneur and who gets to be at the table. And also capital tied to, right? Direct capital tied to those new opportunities to create alpha. I think that's gonna be the real focus going forward, whether you're thinking about the philanthropic side, where you're thinking about private investment, growing companies and entrepreneurs anywhere. This is going to be the big challenge. How are we solving the underlying root cause challenges facing society in a way that uplifts new types of entrepreneurs and new ways of doing entrepreneurship?
It sounds like it's an opportunity. You mentioned alpha, and you mentioned the investment opportunity, but at the same point, you're talking about human beings and the opportunity for them. It sounds like you're creating something new called like a neighborhood alpha that is connecting the two. Is pretty interesting on how you combine the support to the investments you make in the entrepreneurs, the understanding of how solving problems, but also the returns you're giving investors. How Sylvester, are you seeing? What would an outsider call your business? What would you call your business?
So that's an interesting question. Usually, I am not happy with the way outsiders describe what we do. Usually people say that, what Coded by Kids does is workforce development. And I push back on that and say, we don't do workforce development. We don't do jobs. That is not what Coded by Kids does. And the reason we don't do jobs is because our vision, mission, our mandate is intentionally and specifically around preparing underrepresented young people for leadership positions in tech. That is where we focus. And this conversation often comes up where people will say, like, well, you do workforce development, right? And I'll say no. And you get into a conversation about, well, why wouldn't you prepare kids for jobs? And my response is always, when you set the bar at jobs, that's a very low bar to set. And we have a history in our country of setting a low bar, especially when we're talking about Black and brown children. For me, I want to set the bar as high as possible, and then it's up to our kids. It's up to us to support them and give them the resources and everything they need to get there. But I think it's a truly unfair system when we set a low bar and then we meet that low bar by refusing to invest in our young people, and then point the finger at them when they only achieve, mediocrity, when really it was us. We were the problem. Someone once said to me, not everyone is going to be a CEO or a CTO. And my response was, you're absolutely right. But if we set the bar there and we fail, what happens? Our kids become VP of product. They become director of engineering. Our failure is very different than when you set the bar at a job and you fail. So, for me, I would say what we're doing is, we are a innovation leadership organization. That's what we're producing. We're producing young people that are able to perform at the highest levels of the tech and innovation space. We don't do jobs.
That's great. Well, I got to ask you the same question, to be fair. What do people traditionally say that you do, but what do you really feel that you do?
I mean, people think that we're a funder, that we're a foundation, and that is the last thing we do. Funding is one of the very last things we do. I think Greenlight is a community tool. It's a tool that the community uses to synthesize its challenges and then align interest and capital around, so that the community is in charge of the investments that are coming into it and are at the table deciding how that investment will grow and scale over time. The last thing we do in our process is make an investment. The first thing we do is listen intently to communities who tell us what their needs are. So I see us as a vehicle for community investment by communities. And as long as we kind of keep that type of, that, I wouldn't call it humility, so to say, but it's truth. Philanthropy, in order to be better engaged, in order to be more effective, needs to be the sense making and the choice making needs to be made by those who are experiencing the problem, those who are closer to the problems to create solutions to them. And it's a very similar kind of analog around entrepreneurship, right? We need entrepreneurs who are closer to a different type of problem than we're used to being funded and seeing. For Greenlight, again, if we center the funding, people will come to us for funding. If we center the communities that we're trying to improve by introducing new and different innovations and ways to bring communities together, then we're centering communities. And that outcome and that impact is more important than capital. That outcome is more important than the growth of an individual business. So at the end of the day, we have to be human-centered. We have to put community and people at the center of any and everything we do, and then attract capital to something that's authentically human. And if we do that, I think we achieve better scale with greater authenticity.
We love the concept of human-centered design, and taking a page from Silicon Valley and Sylvester's world of design thinking that creates amazing technology interfaces. But the $1 billion and billionaires that are created by user interface, we don't apply it to our neighborhoods. We don't apply design thinking to capital structures. We don't think who the users are of capital. The users are the recipients of where that money goes and the communities that are affected by that. And we firmly believe there's a new stakeholder economy out there that is in the middle of shifting this. I think most of the discussion today is really stakeholder economics. And in order to achieve that is design thinking, which is a primary, I'm sure, Sylvester, you're teaching agile and user interface and all kinds of things. I'd love to hear a little bit back and forth about you all bragging about the people that you're proud of. One person at a time. These events often where people are sitting on stages talking about systemic issues and policy objectives and the great things of their organization. Let's make it human. Let's go back and forth. I don't have to say anything. Sylvester, you start and just go back and forth a few times. And we've got someone who's joined us by accident, but that's okay. Zale, I think you're on the wrong functionality. You might want to be in a green room or something, but you're
Sorry.
You're welcome. You're welcome to sit there. Why don't we start with Omar? You starting with an example.
Of entrepreneurs
Yeah.
that I'm a big fan of. I'll give two. One on the for-profit side, one on the nonprofit side. On the for-profit side, I'm a big fan of People Joy. The idea of scaling student loan repayment assistance as an employee benefit is brilliant and overdue. And he's a serial entrepreneur, but he has figured out a way to partner with area institutions to provide this as an employee benefit. I think it's transformational. I think it's a way to attract a different type of potential employee, a younger employee. And I think it's a way to improve employee retention as well as employee morale. And it's also a way to solve a problem at scale, right? Which is $1 trillion of student loans. You can imagine that if you have young people between the ages of 20 and 25 who are still on their parents' health insurance, how those first 5 years of student loan repayment would be transformational for their financial bottom line. These are one of these. That's just an example of a model and an entrepreneur who is just top notch, just doing amazing stuff. So I would urge people to take a look. On the nonprofit side,
one at a time. Hold on, we're only going one at a time. Let's go back to Sylvester. We're coming back to you.
I'm gonna actually say Omar. I think it is important to recognize the position that Omar is sitting in. The void for Black people in leadership in the nonprofit space is just as extreme, it's just as bad as tech. And then you look at the fact that he's not just in a leadership position, he's not just leading an organization in the nonprofit space, but he's also leading an organization in the nonprofit capital space, which you start to get even more extreme. So I want to recognize and Omar and I talk, so it could at times go unsaid, but I do want to recognize that he's sitting in a very unique position for someone who looks the way that he does. And he's also been able to sit in that position and use that position to have real impact and push a real agenda. Unfortunately, sometimes when we are in those positions, we are not empowered to truly be as impactful as we can be or want to be. So we occupy the position, but we don't occupy the power that comes with the position. So I want to make sure that I'm recognizing that Omar is someone who's not just occupying the position, but he's also using the power that comes with the position to push impact.
Excellent. Well, there you go, Omar. Back to you.
Gosh, I mean, how do I not go back to Sylvester, right? But in addition to Sylvester, one thing I should say, what he's doing with One Philadelphia and his idea of bringing collaboratives together, you're going to see a lot of leaders continue to do this. And I'm not necessarily going to highlight an entrepreneur so much as a model, a collective impact model that I hope others try to replicate, which is how do I, on a system level, change behavior, norms, and resource allocation with the people at the table who are influencers in that market or in that space. Those are the types of ways that we're going to really change anything, right? Is all together. And I think Sylvester has figured out a way, and there are others but it's in pockets across the city, right? We need to bring more of it together and thread it more together. So I'll throw it back to Sylvester for you.
I'm going to recognize some of our young people. I still call them kids. They're in college now. They're still kids to me. It's interesting watching them, and two of them that come to mind are essentially starting a startup that's being pushed out of Coded by Kids. Within Coded by Kids, we started building a way of looking at education data and bringing together education data from a lot of disparate sources together to do analytics and visualizations and give people in the education space the ability to have a better understanding of what's happening with their data. Because you now have teachers and schools and school districts using all of these different systems, and none of them were meant to connect with each other or work together. So we started down that road, and we were fortunate because, by focusing on building leaders, we had two young people who were, came through our organization. They started with us in high school. The CEO is a junior at Penn. The CTO is a junior at Drexel. So we had these two young people who we had been preparing since they were in high school for this, and then said, hey, you're going to take this and you're going to push it out of Coded by Kids. We're going to provide you with your first round of seed capital, all of the resources that you need, and then we're going to help you along the way. To be able to watch two young people come out of our organization, and now they're having conversations about building a data and analytics startup, raising real venture capital. Like, to me, it's a powerful thing to watch that happen, to watch the growth, to watch the development, to be able to have conversations with, two college kids about real management issues that they're going through and real leadership issues they're going through. Watch that and watch them is an amazing experience. Watching young people like that is what keeps me going. Anyone who's been in the nonprofit space is not always the easiest space to. They are what makes it possible space to keep going.
That's great. Well, as you all are impacting these people and industries, can this be scaled? can you all, have you all done all that you can do? Or could you do more? And if the answer is you could do more, what does it take to allow you to do more in the impact that you're having? Omar.
There's one analog from the nonprofit sector, particularly the workforce development sector, against supporting business support, technical assistance for entrepreneurs. And the similarity is that in our human services model and workforce development models, we generally seek to, unfortunately, provide models that try to fix broken people. If we train someone enough, if we give someone enough tools, enough frameworks, they'll be able to do what they need to do. It's crucial, that is true. But at the end of that training, if there's not a job, a well-paying job at the end of that workforce development program, what are we doing it for? Similarly, if we're going to provide A1 support, business technical supports and technical assistance supports to entrepreneurs, the real underlying challenge, particularly for early entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, is access to capital. So if you're going to put someone through an entire process and there not be any meaningful likelihood of capital at the end of it, what are we doing? And so I find that these two things are true. We try to fix broken individuals, and these are generally people of color, and we're trying to help fix broken businesses, right? Which aren't broken. They're entrepreneurs. And in addition to the support, they need capital. And unless we have programs that allow you to get a job at the end of the training, or support programs that ensure you access to capital at the end of it, if you're not building continuums, then you're wasting your time and wasting your effort. And if it's not you doing it, partnering with someone else so there's a clear continuum and handoff is crucial. And so I've been saying this, screaming it from the rooftops for years. And it's something that I know Greenlight is really trying to focus on. We've been trying to create, how do we find that continuum of not just business support organizations, but a connection to capital after what it is they figured out they need. And if we can start moving in that direction, something Greenlight is going to begin to put dollars into to understand, I think we'll be able to accelerate Black and brown business formation as well as sustainability in the city of Philadelphia.
Well, let's get to that in a little, because that's, I think you're also touching on what you described in Sylvester as a collective with one PHL. And there's a little bit of what you just said, the support and the capital. Sylvester, what are ways that what your work is, what you've been able to do, that you could scale it or extend it? What would be the key asks that out there? Let's say it's Christmas time, Santa Claus is everyone's writing their wish lists. What do we need for you to really take it to the next level?
So I usually start with capital, and I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Omar. When I have this conversation, this is a very direct, deliberate conversation I've had with funders and with people about One Philadelphia. The problems that we're trying to solve aren't accidents. People often say the system is broken. My response is the systems are not broken. The systems are functioning exactly the way that they were intended to function. One of the features of those systems has historically been intentional disinvestment. So when I talk to funders that don't want to get behind fixing these problems with real dollars, my response is you can't fix intentional disinvestment with more disinvestment. If you want to fix the problem, you have to be willing to invest in fixing the problem. You have to be willing to write checks and put money into fixing systems that were built around intentional disinvestment. So I usually start there and say that is the starting point. The second point is recognizing that the systems were intentionally designed to have the impact that they're having, and we need to commit to building new systems. We keep trying to find positive outcomes working within systems that weren't designed to produce positive outcomes, which is crazy to me. We have to stop. Like you're not going to get a positive outcome from a system that wasn't intended to do that. We have to build new systems, and we have to build systems with equity at the beginning. And, if we can start there and focus on that, and, with One Philadelphia, I'm essentially saying, hey, let's recognize these truths, and let's come together and start pulling the money that we really need. Because, you get into this thing where a funder will say, okay, I'm going to give you 6 months worth of funding, or I'm going to give you 12 months worth of funding. And you'll say, well, I'm trying to solve an equity. I can't solve an equity in 6 months. We need to collectively come together to pull the dollars, to pull the resources, the funding that we really need to dig into these problems, and start from how do we build new, truly equitable systems that yield the positive results we ultimately want.
So let's say COVID is behind us. We can all go out in our normal lives, and you're invited to dinner. You both have dinners, but one is a for-profit investment that is an impact investor, wants to get both positive but wants a return. The other is a very mission-aligned nonprofit, and you have to go. They're both in town at the same time. They're from out of town, and you can either choose to go to dinner with one of them to pitch another one of them, or you can invite them both. What do you do and why? It's so much fun to talk to you guys when we haven't had any briefings, so I can ask you questions that you're not ready for.
That's fascinating. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I'm wearing a mask through 2023. I don't know about you.
Okay, so this is a 2023 dinner.
I would stay away from flu and all of it, right? The future and the near future, there's going to be a tremendous downsizing of mission-aligned nonprofits. There's going to be a tremendous downsizing of small businesses as well. So I just want to lay that out. There's going to be a lot that's going to happen in the next year that's going to be difficult, right, for nonprofits and for-profits. That said, in the near term, I am very, very interested in impact investing. Incredibly so. Because I now understand that because of COVID, and not just because of COVID, but also because of the issues around the murder of George Floyd and others, there is now a willingness to allocate capital, right, to areas that a year ago were incredibly risky. But today, it's the right thing to do, and the risk has been mitigated because others in the space have now all crowded it. So the ability to move capital to areas that were impossible a year ago are now possible today. And I would be very, very interested in trying to understand that in a meaningful way. So I'll pause there.
What do you say, Sylvester?
So with One Philadelphia, we are in the process of launching a venture fund for for-profit companies. But we're also making grants to nonprofits that are mission aligned. So we've made the decision we have to do both. There is a place, there's a need, there's impact with the for-profit, social impact company. And we need to be able to put backing, resources, funding behind them. But we also need to be able to ensure the long-term sustainability of great nonprofits, especially, for us, a thing that we're really looking at is how do we support nonprofits that are run by underrepresented leaders that have an extremely difficult time, in the best of circumstances. Often we talk about COVID, But the problems the nonprofits that you see in Philadelphia are having, this was before COVID. It's easy to say like, everything is worse because of COVID. Like, no, things weren't great for Philadelphia, especially community-based nonprofits before COVID. How do we strengthen them while also investing in scalable for-profit enterprises?
That's great. So let's talk about Philadelphia for a second. Let's talk about positive outcomes for Philadelphia, and recognizing that this discussion is happening now because we just believe this is a critical moment. A lot of eyes on Philadelphia. Philadelphia has stepped up, made itself known, and is right in the middle of change. What would you like to tell the institutional investors, the major foundations, the family offices, the nonprofits that are not in Philadelphia, that are listening right now, and that will listen when they look at this recording, on how or why it makes sense to allocate place-based dollars to Philadelphia, and if there's any caveats to that. But just you all have committed your lives to Philadelphia. It's your home, but is it more than a local opportunity? And just like both of you to riff, we can go back and forth, interrupt each other, but let's just talk about why people should invest in Philly.
I mean, do you want me to go, Omar? Or?
I mean, first things first is, we have zip codes in the city that have been disinvested in for 50 years. There's still talent in those places. There's still great ideas in those places. There's lack of investment. And so, number one, why would you not? I mean, these are emerging markets in America, right? So that's the first place I would say. I'll turn it over to you.
I would say Philadelphia right now sits at a unique crossroad. People often bring up the Valley, they bring up the Bay Area, they bring up Seattle. To me, what I point out is, yes, these are places that have been able to experience tremendous growth as a result of the tech space, but that growth has not been equitable growth. So yes, these places have had something that you could look at as phenomenal, but no, it did not yield positive outcomes for everyone. Philadelphia sits at a crossroad where if we are truly committed, we could be the leader in the country at building a truly equitable tech and innovation ecosystem. And for anyone in the country, any funder, any donor, any family office that says we truly believe in equity, the opportunity to invest in a city that has that potential, that has that ability, that sits at that crossroad, to me, it's why wouldn't you? How could you not fund that?
So if we've got a billion-dollar company from Silicon Valley or individual that made their money, often that comes from Silicon Valley, that has been deeply moved and recognize the injustice of the racial equality, that the uprising has connected to most of America who might not have been so aware. The Philadelphia is a direct hit, a perfect spot for something they already know, tech, to invest not 1 million, but 100 million into as a starting point for an industry to rebuild. Is that fair to say?
It is. I would say so. If there's any place that has the potential, that Philadelphia, if there's any place that has that potential, it's Philadelphia. Philadelphia's tech community, tech ecosystem is like anyone who lives in the city has seen the growth. There is a significant amount of growth happening in the city right now. But where we can really get to where we want to is, can we make that growth equitable? And we're not far enough down the road where we can't. And it would be hard for me to make an argument against not investing in a city that has those two things happening at the same time.
Okay, next Philly point, because we're getting some in the chat, but those, as an emerging market in our backyard, that usually emerging and frontier markets, you invest for higher alpha, but this is within America, and it happens to be our first capital, and it happens to be X, Y, and Z, and the potential tech industry. Back to you, Omar. What's next?
The one thing I would add is we have tremendous assets where those assets are nationally recognized but locally underutilized and underinvested in. So we have tremendous higher education capacity, research capacity, but our outcomes in terms of educational attainment are incredibly low. We have some of the best healthcare institutions in the country, but maternal and infant mortality rates, for example, are incredibly low. So the opportunity presents itself like, wow, I have these amazing assets, but I need to find better coordination, better collaboration, and aligned funding in order to accelerate outcomes. You can improve your talent base from an educational attainment and from a health perspective, and you can grow your local market so you don't have to go out and import talent from other places. So the focus for me has been a long time. If you invest in Philadelphia, you will have access to a growing talent base, a well-educated base, right, who deeply, deeply believes in what they call home. There's a deep focus on the greatness of Philadelphia for those who are from Philly. So if you want to take that buy local and invest local mentality, I think that would be ideal, because we've underinvested in it for so long and imported talent from elsewhere. Let's at one point, for the first time in a long time, prioritize, local Philly as opposed to importing talent from elsewhere.
It's great. We're getting some nice things, and because I'm dyslexic and I call, like, you all are so smart, you're a multitasker. I call myself a quarter tasker. I can only do like a quarter of a task at a time, so I'm missing so much but I did see the location and the hub that Philadelphia has for transportation and logistics. I did see food, which makes so much sense. We know those entrepreneurs, I believe what you're doing. And the reason we're focusing on entrepreneurialism in this as one of the three major areas of transformation that Philly can have is because those entrepreneurs become industries. And Philly has room for new industries. And Sylvester, you mentioned a key industry, and there's probably a few others, but they're only going to come from entrepreneurs. I don't think you're going to get them by one gigantic company moving in and transforming. I think that comes from within, just like everything does. And then it's Philly's own. Omar, you're going to talk a little bit when we close in our commitment session on new funding initiatives that you're doing and growth. But Sylvester, you've got some things going, and I just thought it would be good to take this time to give us a little more information on some of the things that the world listening here, and also this will be recorded and sent out to many more people when they hear this, can get behind initiatives that you're up to. So what's the ask of the crowd with being sensitive to this is not a SEC driven, this is a public venue here.
So I would say first, getting engaged with One Philadelphia, either as a partner or a funder. With One Philadelphia, we are pulling together partners across sectors throughout the city and basically putting a stake in the ground and saying, hey, let's all get behind one vision. And that one vision is tech and innovation. And how do we move as many underrepresented people into the tech and innovation space as possible? People have said to me, Sylvester, you're biased to tech and you're over-indexing on tech. And my response has been, you're absolutely right. But it's because of what the data says in terms of where opportunities going and where underrepresented people are right now. So yes, but there's a very deliberate reason why. If you feel like, hey, I represent an organization or an entity that would make a great partner, please reach out to us. If you feel like, hey, you know, I'm at a company that should be coming on as a funder, or I'm at a foundation or a family office, please reach out to us. You know, we're saying, hey, we need everyone to get behind this to really push something forward. And to make it work for the city. You know, this can't be a one organization, two organization thing. This has to be the entire city of Philadelphia. As a part of that, you know, one of the things I mentioned was we're raising a venture capital fund. So, you know, we're looking for LPs to come on. We're putting up $100,000 of our own money and saying, hey, who else is willing to come to the table to invest in underrepresented founders? And we're also doing the same thing on the nonprofit side. We're saying, hey, we want to invest in underrepresented nonprofit leaders who have potential and talent, who often are underlooked. You know, to Omar's point about going through programs and there not being anything at the end. You know, we're saying, hey, we want to help prepare, you know, high potential underrepresented leaders in the nonprofit space, but also make sure that there's a check waiting at the end to fund what it is they're doing.
That's great. And I'll finish up by asking you both just a 2-word answer or 3-word answer. What, and then I'll give a little perspective of what's in the other rooms and the remaining of the day, which really appreciate everyone listening. Sylvester and Omar, maybe we'll start with you, Omar. What's a favorite thing that you can only get in Philadelphia, that you can't get anywhere else? What do you love that you know that you can't get anywhere else?
You ever experienced a Monday morning or Tuesday morning after an Eagles win or an Eagles loss, right? Is a collective 1.6 million people, right, feeling one way or another. And there's something to be said about that. There's something unique about a large city like Philadelphia that, for whatever reason, has a common psyche that's tapped routinely, whether it be sports or in other ways. It is uniquely Philadelphian. It is it's a joy, and even when I didn't live here, I always looked for it. But to be in a place where you have so much in common with so many on a broad set of things, it means that there's something you can build common humanity on. And that's what I see possible in Philadelphia that I don't necessarily see in other cities. I mean, I'm from Philly, born and raised, so of course that's what I'll say. But it is special.
Sylvester?
For me, Philly has always felt like a big little city to me. Philly is definitely a big city, but it always feels small enough where, you know, if you don't know someone, there's only like 2 or 3 degrees of separation. I've always appreciated that, and always have appreciated the ability to meet people who really have the city's best interest at heart, and connect and, you know, commiserate over, you know, our sports teams, but then also talk about what we can do to change the city.
Thank you both so much. This has been unbelievable. And I'd just like to let the audience know that when we close here, whether you push the stage button or the session buttons, we now have 3, whether it's food systems, or whether it's collaborative capital in Philadelphia, or investing in racially just Philadelphia. You have 3 sessions, and then we'll finish up with Ernest Owens talking to us for 5 to 7 minutes about some things, and then we'll all on the main stage, and then we'll finish up with a series of commitments that are being made to Philadelphia to take Philadelphia forward that we will feel in 2021. And so with that, Sylvester and Omar, thank you so much. We're so grateful for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.